We don't have a George Wallace out there anymore that's a Democrat in Alabama that is dividing people along racial lines. But we do have people that are professed Democrats and leaders in the Democratic Party that do that. And that makes it a lot tougher. And we've got to make sure that Democrats as a whole try to be equal for everybody. It doesn't matter. And when the chairman of the party continues to talk about and divide people along racial lines, we're going to struggle. We're going to struggle getting to first base.
Alrighty. Welcome in, kiddos, to another fantastic week of your favorite political podcast. It's Alabama Politics This Week with Josh Moon and
David Person, man. How's it going?
I'm all right, David. How you doing, man?
I'm all right.
Good Thanksgiving?
Yeah, great Thanksgiving. I actually made 3 stops. Can you believe that? 3.
I can. 3 stops. That sounds like you were on my schedule.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Listen, we do that. We got my family, my wife's family. We got Bill and Susan that we work for. They always have a big company Thanksgiving thing around there. I mean, I know that you've moved on to bigger things, but if you had still stayed around with us, you'd be invited to that. But listen, that's, we can invite you anyway. I guess we should do that next time. But even though,
I'm just the black sheep, huh? I'm just the black sheep.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Just come by, stepped on our heads on to bigger things, and it was off to more lucrative offers. But no, we had a good time. Yours, everything was good. You had a good time at yours?
Oh, absolutely, man. Hanging out with my cousin and her husband and children, and then some dear friends. I got these friends. We have been getting together since before our children were born. So during the holidays, so that's like, 30 plus years of Thanksgivings and Christmases and Easter weekends. And so I went and hung out with them and then wrapped it up with my lady's family. So it was good. It was good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that sounds like a good fun time. I know you didn't eat any turkey.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't do meat. You're right.
Yeah.
Don't do meat.
It's you got everything else though, right?
I got plenty of good food, man. Got some got salad and more than salad. They have vegetables and there's some for those who are vegan or vegetarian, folks know there are a lot of meat substitutes out there. So got some meat substitutes that work well for me. So it was a good day.
Good deal. It's same here. Same here. We had lots of good food, lots of good folks, and we had a fun time. There was a ball game on Saturday. Didn't go the way I would like to do it, for it to have gone. But not unexpected. So it's the life I'm leading over here. Luckily they've started playing basketball in Auburn, and things are looking pretty strong right there. So we got that going for us, which is nice. But no, it's been a good time, and hopefully those will continue up until the Gestapo comes for us.
Lord
and
Jesus.
The Trump, it just continues every. It's what I'm saying. It's one of the worst things about it. It's every single day. Every day it's something. Pete Hegseth or the DEA guy pulling his name out, or Matt Gaetz can't do it, or it's something every single day, man.
And Hegseth is, he's just really crashing and burning. I mean, in a way that is almost as spectacular as the way that Matt Gaetz did. I mean, this stuff coming out about the email that his mother wrote to him that basically told him what a basically horrible person he was.
Yeah.
Even though he's her son and she loves him, but he's a horrible person, an abuser of women, a user of women, and now the stuff about drinking. Here's the tripped out thing. I'm gonna ask you about this. I mean, we've both been doing this media work for decades now. I can't fathom. I don't know if you've ever had this experience or not, but I never have. And I can't fathom actually having to work with somebody who comes to work drunk, or if not drunk, certainly reeking of alcohol.
Yeah.
And that's what they're saying about Hegseth at Fox. They said he would come to work smelling of alcohol and that he would barely get there on time, before airtime. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, I have, unfortunately worked with a couple of people that, that had problems. They had problems, and there were times when they would disappear. And now, I mean, I would say it's really odd for a person to attain that level of a job, with such a problem, because normally that tends to rear its head fairly early, and but also with success, it allows you some cover to do some to do certain things and to buy certain things, and so I could see how it might happen. But I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate that somebody, he didn't have anybody close enough to him to say, hey, look, man, this is going down a bad path here.
Yeah.
You gotta get yourself some help. And listen, from all indications, Pete Hegseth has been terrible to a lot of people. But it also all seems to be tied to his addiction. And so hopefully, he can get himself some help and clean things up and fix a lot of that.
Well, yeah. And I think you're right. And I'm glad you inserted that, because, that is an important thing to remember. And it's easy getting so caught up in the politics. It's easy to forget. Not only does he perhaps have an addiction problem, an alcoholism problem, but there's some who have said that it may be related to PTSD.
Yeah.
So, due to his military service. So,
yes.
He's, it's kind of hard to view him as a sympathetic figure when you think about some of the things he said and apparently done. But then it also sounds like, he's human and he needs some help.
Yeah, no, that's right. That PTSD and the things that we ask those guys and women to do, affects people differently. All of life affects people differently. And, if you've ever struggled at any point in time with any sort of mental health issue, I mean, just imagine, having things like that occur and seeing the things that they see and being in those situations and how it might affect you long term. And then, they come back home here and we're shocked or like, what the hell's wrong with you, dude?
Right.
If when they don't behave exactly the right way. And it's really, it's on us more than it is them. I mean, we're the ones that have subjected them to this. And, it's always been, it's always been funny. I'm like Jon Stewart, and I'm a liberal pro-military guy, which is not things that you hear very often. You know what I mean? It's but I mean, I recognize the necessity of having that defense and what it's done for us over the course of the span of this country, and I appreciate the hell out of those guys that go and do that, and women. I keep saying guys, but both. That go and do that job, that volunteer for it and go over and fight things and, fight in wars and fight in places that we don't want to go. And, I would if I had to, but it's still, I would prefer not to. Trust me. I've seen what it does to people. And, I just, it always troubles me, when we have those sorts of situations where we treat them unfairly, and also where we don't carry through on the promises that we made, or we pretend as though we never made the promises. The stuff about education, paying that back, and and it's that now all of a sudden they've got to jump through 18 hoops to get it, when all they had to do before was sign that paper and walk out the door and get on the bus. And it's just I don't know. I think that there's a lot of room for that.
Yeah, healthcare is the same way. Yes. They deserve the best possible healthcare and treatment that's available, and it seems like we fall short on that commitment as well.
Oh,
like you, I'm a big believer or supporter of people who serve. Yeah. However, I have many problems with the policies and the leadership decisions that put these brave women and men in harm's way. And I have a major problem with that. So we absolutely have to have a military. I'm not on the side with people who think maybe we shouldn't. We absolutely have to have intelligence services. I absolutely support that and the brave people that do that work. But the policies and the actions that they are ordered to commit, sometimes I've had major problems with that. When we were talking about Hathseg earlier in his challenges, I thought about, well, I've never worked with anybody who came to work, as far as I know, who came to work inebriated or reeking of alcohol. And I've worked in several different newsrooms, and like I know, newsrooms can be, we can be a motley crew of people. I'll just say it like that. But I have worked with somebody who stunned the heck out of me one morning. This was at a certain radio station that shall go unnamed. One morning I walked into the station, I think it was probably about 8:00 or something like that. And this guy had his underwear hanging on a hanger in the control room. Apparently I don't know what his health situation was, but apparently he'd had a problem getting to the bathroom and made a little bit of a mess. And so he had, I guess, washed his underwear in the sink and then just had it hanging up in the control room.
Yeah, the show's got to go on, brother. The show's got to go on. Okay,
man, you should have put that underwear. You should have put the underwear somewhere else, not in the control room that everybody's got to use.
If people only understood the characters that you run into in radio and newspapers. I mean, it is unreal. Listen, man, we had in our newsroom at the Montgomery Advertiser, I'm not going to name any names or anything, although I should. We had two guys who were ready to go to blows. All right. And it was the last night that the baseball bat was allowed in the newsroom. I'll say that. Because one of them picked up the baseball bat and got tackled by several of the other staff members. All right. And resulting from that was claims of racial epithets being used, to which the black executive editor replied, "Both of y'all are black. What happened there?" Oh my God, man! I'll never forget, man. I was kind of along the same lines of coming in early one day. We were going to Auburn to cover a game. This is back when I was in sports. I started out in sports, and we were going to Auburn to cover a game. And I stopped in at the newspaper on my way to Auburn to grab, I don't know, parking pass, credential, something. And when I opened the door to the newsroom, I hear, "Oh, go, no!" And I walk in, and the place is basically dark everywhere. But over in the sports section of the newspaper, there is one guy who used to do basically agate and layout work for us. And I know nobody at this point knows what agate is or anything else. But he's standing in a rolling chair underneath one of the TVs watching a horse race. And he has bet, God only knows what he's bet on this, because he was our degenerate gambler at the time who was consistently winning or losing his entire life savings from week to week. And he was screaming at the top of his lungs at this damn thing and was just in tears at what was taking place on the screen. And I'm like, "Hey, man, you okay? You all right?" "I can't talk about it. I just can't talk about it." I mean, it was something all the time with these folks, man. And then in radio, the same way. I mean, I don't know how some of these people lived. And this was not what we were planning on talking about when we opened up. But now we'll talk about DEI and some of the other stuff in the close, because we're going to have Doug Jones on in a few minutes. But we still need to tell you about the sponsors of this thing, because we got into this stuff and we never even told you about the sponsors.
My bad. I'm sorry.
No, it's not your bad at all. It's it's an interesting conversation. That's why people are here. And so it is. You're right, man. I miss that. I miss it. But honestly, it kind of ties into the DEI part because you get that eclectic kind of grouping of people that produce those stories and produce the news every day and understand how to cover stuff and go out and make the relationships and if you ever want to hear somebody talk intelligently about what we've lost with newspapers, I suggest David Simon, who is the creator of The Wire, creator of Homicide: Life on the Street, and several other shows. He gave a speech before Congress at one point and talked about the lacking of institutional knowledge that we have now in this country, where you don't have reporters who go out and sit in the cop bars and talk to the cops, and who can't duck underneath the crime scene tape and go walk around the crime scene with their sources, who don't pull people off to the side at a shooting and get the real story of what's taking place, don't have the relationships within the department and within City Hall, and now people are worse off for it. You don't know what's going on, but it honestly is amazing because I've been into newsrooms and around people who work in various newsrooms all over the country and heard the stories and stuff from them. They're all the same. All of the people, they all have weirdos and just insane people that work in these places that do insane things like hang their underwear from the radiator, or whatever, man. It's just, honestly, they had a guy at the Advertiser. You couldn't go into his space because it was so disgusting that you felt like you were going to catch something. There was just food and crumbs and stuff everywhere, and it was just a mess constantly. And then you had the other guy that was just the neat freak, where things, if you moved the cup holder, we used to go in and move the guy's, he had a little cup. We used to go in and move it 6 inches to the right all the time, just because we knew it would drive him insane, and he'd have to move everything back and re-straighten the entire desk.
And would he come storming out of his office fussing and trying to figure out who had messed with his stuff?
Listen, no, it was because we were all in cubicles, and so you would get a what the hell? I'm so sick of this.
Which, of course, meant that it was going to continue.
Oh, yeah. So then right after that, it would be all quiet, and you would just hear.
You're right. Craziest story I ever heard, and I know we need to get back on track, but craziest story I ever heard. I didn't witness this, thank God, but apparently one Sunday morning at the same unnamed radio station, the general manager had some friends in town, and he was going to, basically, show them the station, take them on a little tour of the station, right? Mm-hmm. So he gets in there, he goes through the door with his guest, and at this particular station, well, let me not be too specific, but I'll just say he walked into a certain area of the station with the guests, mm-hmm. and the announcer who was working that morning apparently was having sex with someone else.
Ooh.
And they all just walked in and like who knows what to say and how to, and I'm sure there was a lot of scrambling around. The fact that he even told me this probably was a violation of some kind of human resources regulation or policy or something. But he told me that, and of course I know the people involved, and I was just thinking, oh boy, that's pretty wild.
Yeah,
but that's the kind of stuff that sometimes happens, though.
Oh yeah, no, it's listen. We're I think one of the crazier things that happened at the radio station. When I went, because I did a sports show for a long time, and one of the crazier things that happened there was we had a deal where a guy had interviewed somebody, and then when he got off we went to commercial. The host was like, My God, can you imagine talking? He was because they had mentioned the guy's wife in that, and he was like, "My God, can you imagine having to go home to her every night? It looked like she's been hit with a bag of nickels. It's just and the entire thing went out over the air, and it was, I mean, yeah, there was some, it was terrible, man. I mean, and we had a few of those situations where there was one where a guy was on the air and somebody else was like, "Hey, go and tell him that he's on the air." And so they, you had a hallway and a window right there, and the guy was like, was going down the hallway to like wave at him and was trying to get his attention, and the guy, you could hear the guy over the radio go, "Oh, here comes Bill. I wonder what that fat SOB wants." And Bill just kept walking.
Of course he did. So you'll find out in your exit interview after we terminate you. You'll find out what I wanted then.
Yeah. So listen, this has been the opening of the political show, and listen, you loved it. People love the stories and the personal stuff and all that, and so it's good, and it's been the show. The rest of it will be political, okay? Because we're going to have Doug Jones on. We're going to talk about the pardon of Hunter Biden. We're going to talk about some of Trump's nominations. We're going to talk about the Alabama Democratic Party and Merrick Garland, and then we're going to come back at the end of this thing and talk about DEI and the Prattville libraries and all this sort of stuff. And the whole thing is brought to you. Need to tell you this: the whole thing is brought to you by the fine folks at Wing Creek Hospitality. They do an excellent job. Matter of fact, I was at the Porch Creek Indians event last night in Huntsville. Went to that. Nice. It's Porch Creek Financial Services. They PCI Financial Services, I guess I should say, is their appropriate name. And they have a lot of federal contracting businesses that operate in Huntsville and around the country, really. And they bring. There's one of the big points is, we got a lot of businesses around here. Not only those people know about the casinos in Chicago, Pennsylvania, Aruba, but they also have those businesses in the financial service industry, and all of it brings that money back into Alabama. Wherever they're located, that money comes flowing back into here, and they use it to do things around in this state and to provide to good causes, such as sponsoring one small podcast. And we really appreciate them for doing that, and never asking for anything. Just say nice things in a read for them, and otherwise just do the show how we ordinarily would. And I think that is the best kind of sponsors that you can ever hope for. And we really do appreciate them doing it, and all the other stuff that they've done for the state, and for their folks on the reservation as well. So, all right, let's. I guess we can slide out of here. We'll come back in just a minute. Get Doug Jones in here and continue this thing on. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Boone, David Person, and as always, we are happy and privileged to have with us Senator Doug Jones. I'm forever going to call you Senator because I just have the dream. I'm not putting former on it because I just don't. If I do so, then I have to acknowledge Tommy Tuberville, and I'm just not going to. But thank you for spending some time, and we've got a ton of stuff that we wanted to ask you about, and so we really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us.
Hey, look, guys, it's always great being with you. I appreciate you asking.
Yeah,
sure.
Good to see you, Doug.
I guess let's start with the most current news and kind of, I guess, maybe work our way back a little bit. And that would be the Hunter Biden pardon. I've said the other day, first of all, I want all Republicans to shut up. There's nothing that Democrats could do at this point that you have anything to say about. Okay, nothing at all. But there has been a lot of more mainstream media that have been, I would say, critical of Joe Biden for doing this. I have not been. I think that Hunter Biden was certainly facing some persecution in the incoming Trump administration that he should not be facing. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the pardon itself and what your thoughts were when you heard about it.
Well, look, I'm not surprised. I've said this before and I'll say it again. First and foremost, Joe Biden is a family man. and he has been, and he's gone through tragedy after tragedy in his family. One with a son, one with a daughter, one with a wife. I mean, it has been one thing over the course of his public career. And there's no question in my mind that he feels in part responsible for the legal issues that Hunter Biden has faced. And not the issues that involved his drug use and those kind of things, but what he's watched is a son who has come out of the depths about as low as you can go without literally being on the streets, with family help, with counseling, with other people's help, pulling himself up, is once again trying to make a life for himself. He's got a new family. Everything seems to be going good, but yet he continues to face this. And so there's two things I wanted to emphasize on this. Number one is that, first of all, I don't think there's any objective review of this by a prosecutor would tell you that the odds of this case being actually prosecuted, Hunter Biden's cases, the firearms case, the tax case, being actually prosecuted, given all the mitigating factors that we've seen with Hunter, the odds of that being prosecuted by a United States Attorney's office is slim and none. That is a fact, folks. I'm just telling you, it is a fact. Even Lindsey Graham and others that are in the know about things like this say that is not one. And we need to go back and remember that the investigation started under the Trump administration. Merrick Garland kept the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in to try to make sure that this DOJ was being fair. And they entered into an agreement, okay, what's known as a pretrial diversion agreement. That agreement would have allowed him to be essentially on probation for a year or two, and then the case go away. It was absolutely, most every prosecutor that you saw or heard from at the time said that this was not a sweetheart deal. It was an appropriate deal. It was a way to resolve a case in which the mitigating factors are so strong. But it went south when a judge questioned it. And the thing that gets lost in this, guys, was that when the judge questioned that, he was not questioning the leniency or it being a sweetheart deal for the president's son. What he was questioning is the court's role, because pretrial diversion is supposed to be between the government and the defendant, and the court has no role in it at all. And in good faith, both DOJ and defense lawyers tried to inject the court in it as a way to say, we're not going to make judgments about whether or not he might violate this. But the court could not do that. And that's why it got rejected. But when it did get rejected, that's when you saw everybody clamoring for this Republican-appointed, Trump-appointed U.S. attorney to go after him, to do this and do that. And I do believe he succumbed to the political pressure. And that's when he went to Merrick Garland for the first time, went to Merrick Garland at that point and said, I want to be a special counsel. Well, and Garland essentially had very little choice at that point with everything going on. So number one, the case wouldn't have been brought. Number two, I don't think there is any question. But after the election, when you've seen who Donald Trump wants to put at the Department of Justice to carry out his retribution, to carry out his purging of the deep state and those things, and the enemies list that he has talked about, that Pam Bondi talked about, that Kash Patel talked about, then you got to figure that as a father, if you've got the power to protect your son who went through a process, was found guilty, but has gone through that process, and the only thing that is awaiting now is sentencing. If you've got a way to protect him, by God, you're going to do it. And I'm going to tell you, Josh, I've been upset at Republicans because of just the pure disingenuousness of it after watching Donald Trump pardon friends of friends, and pardon this and pardon that, pardon Mike Flynn, pardon Roger Stone, all of those folks, Paul Manafort, who was in prison, all on pure corruption charges. And also talking about how, they seem so indignant. Oh my God, they seem so indignant that Joe Biden lied to the American people. Just, oh my God, give me a break. I mean, first of all, he didn't lie. I've known this man for a long time. At the time, he believes in the system. He believed that it was the right thing to do. And when he said, I'm not going to do this, I think he really meant it. And I think he has struggled since this election to decide what to do. But at the end of the day, he's going to protect his son from further prosecution. That's number one. And on the Democrat side, I'm really a little tired of the self-righteousness a little bit. I have this theory, guys. You and I may have talked about this before, that unfortunately our today's politics is a play on Newton's third law of motion. I call it Doug's law of politics. Whenever there is an action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And what you're seeing from the Democrats is a complete and opposite reaction to Donald Trump. They so want to be not Donald Trump that anything that is slightly off kilter, and this would be a father pardoning his son, you got to take the extreme approach and stand up for the Constitution and yada, yada, yada. Come on, guys, give me a break. The pardon power is in the Constitution. It literally is the one place in the Constitution where it says the President of the United States can pick winners and losers. And it's been exercised that way over the course of the 2 centuries that we've been here. It's that simple. Are there other people deserving pardons? Absolutely. We can't get around to all of them. There's no question about that. But this time he's protecting his son, and I can't blame him one bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I have argued essentially what you're arguing here is that Democrats have got to stop this. The people are gonna understand the rule of law and and how we're doing the system the right way, and start following not the actions but the methods in some cases of Donald Trump and the Republicans, where they have realized that nothing matters anymore. All right. I mean, nothing really matters anymore. That you do what you believe is right for you and your people, and then you let the chips fall where they may. And I've argued if they're going to do it for bad things, then Democrats ought to be able to do it for good things, and to help the most of us. And one of the ways I feel like that ball was dropped was I like Merrick Garland. All right. I think he's a good person and a good man, and he wanted to do the right things. But I felt like he was the wrong person for this particular time. And I fully believe that the lack of movement on that case is part of the reason why we have Donald Trump back in the White House. They didn't move, and they let this thing set and fester, and they trusted that the American people were going to recognize their loyalty to the process and loyalty to the law and the Constitution and all this stuff, instead of pressing forward like a Republican appointed special counsel would say with Hunter Biden, and instead, now we're stuck with this horrendous human being for another 4 years, or until the McDonald's kicks in at some point.
Well, look, I have been one not to criticize Department of Justice and Merrick Garland for a lot of reasons. It's unfortunate where we are, in the sense that the rule of law did not get played out, even in terms of a trial and a finding, except because the state attorney general of New York, or the Manhattan DA, that's a whole different jurisdiction. And I think it's easy in hindsight to look and say we should have moved quicker. We should have done parallel investigations with those that stormed the Capitol and those that may have planned to storm, the whole planning exercise and incitement, those kind of things. But, look, Josh, here's the thing. You may be right. We don't know. Okay. There is a part of this that would also, in my view, tell us that Democrats brought this on themselves for years and years about the messaging. And we lost that messaging battle years ago. And this time we probably paid the price for it in a much bigger way than we have in the past. And so I don't think you can point just to that case. I think you have to look at the way the party has just refused to build the kind of information and messaging network that reaches people and voters where they are. And by that, I mean not just their personal circumstances, most of the time when people say, oh, you got to go where voters are, they're talking about their personal circumstances. And that's true. But in this day and age, we got to go where they literally are, whether it's on their damn phones or whether it's on a computer like this, or whether it's just walking around the town square. We got to go where they are, because until you go where they are getting their information, which I distinguish between information and news, until you go where they are getting their information, you're going to lose this war. You're going to lose this battle of information and technology, and you're going to lose the political, because Democrats, it's not just that the other side helps promote their messages. They define the Democrats. And if we're not going to where these people are defining us, then we're going to continue to lose races. And that's the challenge going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with everything you said, and I've said a lot of the same stuff, and the shunning of certain people, the Joe Rogans of the world, and people like I think who could be twisted, or open to to some of the Democratic policies, I think are often a mistake. And but last time before I let David jump in, and because I wanted to ask you a very unfair question. And the very unfair question is, would you have handled that prosecution the same way?
Look, I think it's a difficult question to answer. It's easy to, in hindsight today, to say, oh, well, of course I would handle it different. I would have been more aggressive on the front end. The thing that we don't know is really what all was really truly going on within the Justice Department, what information they had, where they were trying to move. So I think it's not just an unfair question. It's easy to armchair quarterback, to Monday morning quarterback, something like this in light of what has happened. But my guess is those same discussions are being held within the Justice Department too, of what could have been, and should have been. It would have been nice to see a more active investigation early on, not just in those individuals who stormed the Capitol and beat police officers with American or Confederate flags, but also with the underlying, was there something more to this than a spontaneous reaction? And because that's what, there was a theory that's what happened, that people got caught up in this. And it took the January 6th committee to really go beyond that and to say, no, there was some more planning. But I will say that if you go back and think about it, the elements were there, that there was more to be seen than met the eye on January 6th.
The fake electors. Yeah, I mean, the fake electors thing, man. I mean,
fake electors, Donald Trump postponing the gathering. If you remember, this was originally set for December, and he said, no, we're going to come January 6th. It'll be wild. You had Steve Bannon the day before saying all hell was going to break loose. The signs were there that I think could have prompted a kind of parallel and in tandem investigation with the planning and things like that. And that may or may not have resulted in a different thing. The one thing I will tell you guys, and I've said this consistently, I don't think people fully appreciate how the depth and breadth of an investigation of this type. There had never been an investigation like this in the history of this country in terms of numbers of people, possible involvement at the highest levels. And so they were, they didn't have a playbook. Okay. They really didn't have a playbook on how to do this. And so I don't know, but we are where we are.
Yeah, Doug, I agree with you 100% on that. I'm in the camp that says Garland really had to step carefully because, as you were just saying, it was unprecedented, and there were high level things done that are documented. Donald Trump reaching out directly to the Georgia Secretary of State and basically begging him to fudge votes. I mean, you got that sort of thing. You got what happened to the two women who were poll watchers in Georgia. What happened with poll
Poll
workers. I'm
workers,
sorry.
yeah.
Thank you. Poll workers, what happened with them. I mean, there was just there were so many elements to this thing that I just don't think Garland had an easy job. And I think I think, as you just said, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback it. I want to go back to Biden for a minute and Hunter Biden. I was thinking about what you said about, what a parent will do for a child, and especially a child that has had some troubles in his or her life. And, one thing occurred to me, and I know you're a parent, and I think you're a grandparent too, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
One thing that I thought about, and I don't know how you feel, but I'm thinking, as a parent, I know when you see your child going through a tough time or through challenging times, there's always a part of you that asks, did I contribute to this in some way?
Mm-hmm.
Am I in some way culpable? And I can imagine that Joe Biden, even with the drug stuff, might periodically wonder,
Sure.
was there something I could have done, should have done? What do
Sure.
you think?
No, I don't think there's any question about that, David. Growing up, I can remember, not about politicians' kids, but I would always say, I'd always hear people say, gosh, it's tough being a preacher's son or tough being a preacher's daughter because there are certain expectations. And this is not the first time you have seen a politician's son or daughter get into problems. And I can tell you that as a parent, that whether it's true or not, you're going to feel that guilt. And you also know that had Joe Biden not run for president in 2020, the odds of this going away were probably pretty good. Biden became public enemy number one the moment. It was not a coincidence that the phone call that Donald Trump had with President Zelensky in Ukraine that led to the first impeachment was within like a short time of Joe Biden announcing he was going to run for president. And if you remember, that call was all about just announce an investigation of Hunter and Joe Biden. I'll take it from here. Okay. So, yes, there's got to be that feeling of guilt. I don't think there's any question about that. That's not necessarily a reason to pardon somebody if you've got the power. But at the same time, and again, I cannot stress this enough, when you have seen your child go to the depths that Hunter Biden did, to the point that a nude photo was being shown of him in a committee hearing in the House of Representatives by Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you've seen him, but you have also seen him through your help and your wife's help and others, help him come out of that, help him become the kind of man he can be, or is at least significantly on that road. That is an important piece of any pardon exercise, by the way, guys. That is a very important piece of any pardon the exercise of any and granting of any pardon. And when you see that, and you see the continued efforts by political enemies to tarnish that, to pull him back down, to get him in front of congressional committees, you cannot help but feel some responsibility. And I just believe that just about any person in that position would have done the same thing if you had had the power to do it. We do things for our children that we summon our inner strength, and we do that. And having said that, the reason I keep emphasizing the rehab part of this for Hunter is because I know Joe Biden well enough to know that if Hunter had not done that, Joe Biden may very well have said, "Son, a little time behind bars might not be a bad thing for you. It might be the thing to pull you up." So I just think people need to, look, we don't need to compare the Trump pardons or the Bill Clinton pardons or the George W. Bush or H.W. Bush pardons of the Iran-Contra figures. We don't need to do it. He exercised a constitutional duty, and he did it. And now we need to move on. And the one thing Josh and I would say, completely agree, it ain't going to affect a damn thing that Donald Trump does in the Justice Department or with pardons going forward. Not
Right.
a thing.
He was going to do it anyway.
Absolutely.
He's already pardoned his son-in-law's father and then appointed him ambassador to France. I mean, what else can he do? You know,
he's going to do it anyway. He's already done it. Yeah. You know, the thing I wish though, Doug, is that, and this is just a little small strategic criticism, not anything substantive really in the grand scheme of things, but I wish that Biden had just started his explanation of why he did what he did with, I have the right to change my mind.
Yeah, I totally 100% with you, David. You know, I think that is, I think that would have been very appropriate, and it wouldn't have taken away the sting that he's feeling with some of his Democratic colleagues as well as Republicans. But that's exactly what happened, I believe. I strongly believe that. I've seen this guy and his fervent defense of the justice system and the use of that. But I also know that he fears the abuse of that system going forward. Yeah,
no doubt. Let me ask you, before Josh jumps back in, let me ask you, let's go in a different direction. Give us just your own, quickly post-mortem of the Harris campaign. There's a lot of, there's a whole lot of discussion about what could have been done, should have been done. Did she do enough? Why didn't she do this? Why didn't she do that? What's your take on it?
Look, I thought they ran a hell of a campaign. I can tell you from being in a campaign, being the candidate in a campaign, working on any winning or losing campaign, but particularly losing campaigns, everybody's going to say, well, I wish we could have done this. I wish we could have done that. There are still people today that believe that I could have won my race in 2020 had COVID not hit and we couldn't have rallies and go door to door. That's not true. It was probably always destined to lose that race to whoever Republicans nominated at that time. So I have not engaged in what I've called the circular firing squad of Democrats, pointing fingers here and pointing fingers there. I believe two things. First of all, I said before the election, literally the day before, I thought she ran a great campaign. Under tough circumstances, I thought she ran a great campaign. I'm not going to change that just because we lost that race, okay? I really thought that the ground game that she had in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Georgia would carry the day in a close election. It was an amazing ground game. I was in Philadelphia the weekend before, and I really thought that. But I will tell you guys, I was also stuck in a time warp about how important that ground game is. I don't think people want you to knock on their damn doors anymore. Okay. I think, and especially not more than once. People are deciding to vote in different ways, and they're not going to, there are people that engage you, but I really don't think, and because look, Donald Trump didn't engage. He had virtually no ground game. It was others like Elon Musk doing stupid stuff that had virtually no ground game. So part of this, and I go back to what I said a little bit earlier, what I think this has been a long time coming, is that Democrats engage voters only from one campaign to the next. And by then, we've already been branded. It doesn't matter who the nominee is, we have been branded. We were branded this time with being too far to the left, being socialist, being, communist. We were branded by all the transgender issues that people care. We care more about identity than we do about individuals and people. And that's not true. That's not the message of Democrats. But when the electorate is getting their information that's not news, but they're getting information that's interspersed with things that they care about, whether it is sports, whether it is cryptocurrency, whether it's something else, and they're getting some of this information, we get branded. And we don't have that way to go into these folks. And it's not, Josh, just going on Joe Rogan's show. It's having our own kind of Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Okay. And others. And we've got podcasts but we've never had the investment to where we are engaging voters 24/7, 12 months out of the year. We do it primarily with legacy media, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, doing paid media ads, doing some social media ads, relying on the fact that the New York Times and the Washington Post are going to tell the facts. Well, that's not where people are getting there. That's not where people are going to decide how to vote, because overwhelmingly Kamala Harris carried those informed voters. Informed meaning care about politics, care about the news, that do a little research on it. For the less informed and uninformed, and I'm not being critical in that. I'm just being realistic when I say there are people today that they don't give a damn about all of this, like you and I do and others do. They're getting their messages in different ways, and that is formulating who they vote for. And we have lost that. Democrats have lost that battle for years.
Should we blame the DNC for this lack of strategy and engagement that you're talking about?
It's a complicated thing, David, because ultimately, yes, the DNC, but it's not just this DNC. It is DNCs that go back 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
It is DNC that were there, that watched the Koch brothers start to build the Republican message, what I call the rage machine that we've got out there. And it was Democrats who kept hands off of their state parties and let the state parties either rise to the top or fall to the bottom, like Alabama. It is the DNC who did not do the investments. Part of that is also because the DNC has traditionally been seen as primarily getting a president elected. And as we become more and more focused on battleground states, the DNC's focus shifted to those battleground states and not to the American public in general, not seeing that there's a connection between the two. And so we've lost, as there was a time when the media, that when you could rely on a CNN or local news or whatever. We don't have that kind of local news anymore. We don't have the national news. And the DNC and Democrats as a whole have been behind the times in trying to engage voters. We do a hell of a job, guys, by the way, of registering voters. We do a hell of a job registering voters. But we register them and then say, thanks, tune in later. Yeah. And we don't engage them. And we got to engage somehow, some way. And hopefully, David, to your point, and I haven't read this memo yet, Ken Martin put out a memo the other day. He is running for DNC chair about trying to do some of this. I haven't read it yet. I need to, because I'm having discussions with others about it. But I think the next DNC chair, if they go the same path and be very myopic about just winning the presidency and focusing on battleground states, we're going to get our butts kicked for a long, long time.
Yeah. I've argued for a long time in this, and I've watched it up close and firsthand that Republicans will come along and they'll pay people. They'll pay for their media stuff. They'll pay. They'll engage their media folks. I mean, we have them in this state. We see them all the time, and those folks, they make sure that they're taken care of. That there's and listen, you can say, people can bitch and moan about that all they want to, about how awful that might be and how, you're just paying for coverage. That's what works now, man. So you can
here's the thing. You guys get paid for your time.
Yes.
Okay. I get paid for mine as a lawyer or whatever. Influence gets paid for their time. And, we pay, corporations pay a ton of money to do branding for their products.
Yes.
It's really not any different. You're just trying to get the message out there. The difference is, I think Democrats, and I hope this doesn't change if we go into this new world order of trying to get messages out. Democrats, I think, have been very concerned with policy and truth,
Mm-hmm.
and the other side has not.
Yes.
And that's the difference between the populist rhetoric of the MAGA faction, that they just, truth just doesn't matter. It's just information. And there's, information can be accurate. It can be accidental misinformation or intentional disinformation. And they're great at the latter.
Listen, I mean, I could talk about this for hours because I've had this experience of watching them. It's not. Let's just take our podcast for example. I mean, look, we're not tied to the Democratic Party necessarily, but I mean, we certainly put on a lot of Democrats. We talk about the message. We certainly are far more progressive on here and stuff. You got to try to go and get, sponsorship from Democrats,
right.
And from left-leaning folks. It's impossible. At the same time, people with far less reach and with far less of a voice in this thing are raking in cash from Republicans left and right because
right.
that's how they've recognized this game is we're going to pay for these folks to go out and spread our message to the masses, even if the masses are this guy's got a couple thousand and this guy's got a couple thousand, we're going to make sure they're taken care of and that they're spreading that message out to the grassroots folks and it's hitting them where they're getting their news on Facebook because that's where a lot of people especially in the South are getting their stuff is on social media and things. And those people inundate them constantly with these messaging and it shifts their friends and it shifts their thinking.
And it can be very subtle. It's not.
Yes.
It can be very subtle. You watch some of these shows and you'll see advertisers wanting you to invest in gold, for instance. You
Right.
see this on CNN and all that. But what is the first thing they say? Oh my God, the economy's going to hell in a handbag. You got to invest in gold. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
You see that a lot, and it's more than people think. It's not just social media and Facebook and influencers. Republicans have invested in local TV networks across this country. If you go right now and you watch a newscast from any Sinclair broadcasting station, wherever they are, you will see purely local news, which they do, but anything that touches on a national scale or whatever, you could take the same script and move it from Birmingham or Montgomery to anywhere in the North, East, Midwest, wherever. It's the exact same script. And again, it's not overt. It's very subtle messages. It just drove me crazy. Economists are saying unemployment's down, so it looked like the recession may come for a soft landing, but there's still warning signs out there. We've still got this, we've still got that. Yeah. And so everybody's thinking, well, hell, the economy's still in bad shape. Yeah. When the economy's been in great shape, it's been prices that have really killed everybody. It hadn't been the economy.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, and it's just it just drives me nuts to watch this game being played by the other side so well, where you have a Fox News that's now held on the same level as CNN and NBC News and ABC News, and we have proof that number one, they're lying about half the stuff on there because they've admitted it in court, and number two, that they're openly working with the Republican administrations in the White House. Right. I mean, it's just insanity to me that we're doing this, but because we can't let you go before we talk about the local stuff. And that's the Alabama Democratic Party. I wrote a column that was pretty critical of the state party because I went to cast a ballot, and I could have bubbled in at the top, the straight Democratic ticket if I wanted to, but it would have got me the same number of votes basically as I did just bubbling in the one place that I bubbled in. Because there were no Democrats on the ballot, and I guess when you look at this party, you have tried to criticism or not, or you tried to do good things with the party and tried to make some changes, and it seems like we're kind of stuck in a rut here. And I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on where things are.
Josh, this party is a disaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe this. I thought it was a disaster before, but it has become even worse. It is just an unmitigated disaster that has nowhere to go. They can't even get a quorum to hold a meeting, And the reason they can't get a quorum to hold a meeting is because the leadership of the party wants to kind of do all these weird shenanigans to change bylaws, to get rid of caucuses, to deny people the ability to participate, and to put in their own select individuals in places of prominence, whether it is an officer of the SDEC, the State Democratic Executive Committee, or as our representatives to the DNC. They break the rules, and then they try to change the rules to fit it. They cannot raise any significant money. They're not going to be able to recruit candidates. It is time. I mean, it is long since past time for the state party, and falls on the executive committee, to demand new leadership right now, not in 2 years when we have primaries again and a new state party is elected, new SDCs elected. They need to demand new leadership right now. And you go back and you look at what happened in this race. We had the lowest Democratic turnout this time than we've ever had. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. Voter suppression, apathy, whatever. But even in the race that we hold up as our shining star, the second congressional district, the votes were down. The votes were down. In Alabama, we had the lowest voter turnout since 1988. Okay? And it's because of the very thing you said. People don't think that their vote counts. And we can't recruit candidates to get their name on the ballot when they're going to get embarrassed. And that is a real problem. And if you go back, it happened. You had the chairman of our party, and I know that they have denied this, Josh, vehemently, but the convention proved it, that did not vote for our nominee. They did not vote for Kamala Harris to be the nominee. There were 58 designated ballots, votes to be counted from Alabama, delegates that could vote for our nominee. Only 56 were cast. Okay? And they came back from that convention and they got through with this, and they immediately want to have a change of bylaws again. That's all they want to do. They want to challenge the DNC. They want to challenge the bylaws. It's time that they just retire. It is time for new leadership to come in. Look what's going on in North Carolina with that young girl who's the chairman. She's like 26, 27 years old. She's caught them on fire. And they won. They didn't win the presidency in North Carolina, but they won up and down the ballot because they had good candidates that they were recruiting. You can make a change. And everywhere I've gone in the state, there are Democrats wanting a home. There are Democrats out there that want to do, but they're not going to support this Democratic Party because the leadership seems to be only care about themselves and their little small cabal. And that has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with those who try to grab and maintain power.
So, Doug, you just said it has nothing to do with race, but we know the reality is the Alabama Democratic conference, the ADC, is overwhelmingly a black organization, led by Joe Reed, Randy Kelly, who also is the state party chair, and has largely, I think, been universally viewed by everybody, as far as I can tell, yourself included, I think, as the place to go to make sure that you get the black vote in the state of Alabama.
Oh, David, that hadn't been true for years.
Okay,
I've
talk
never
to me
said
about
that. No, that hadn't been true
that.
for years.
Okay.
You can in a local primary, maybe, but those little yellow ballots that ADC puts out,
Okay.
they're not having any effect right now. ADC, look at what happened in the 2nd congressional district during the primary.
Okay.
And by the way, let me say this first.
Okay.
There is a real problem when you've got an organization that endorses candidates in a primary.
Yeah.
Okay? In a primary, they endorse candidates that come to them, pay the money to go to their luncheons, and they endorse candidates, and the same people that are running that organization are also running the Democratic Party, that ain't right. Okay? That's one thing that hasn't been talked about.
No disagreement.
But look what happened. Yeah. Look what happened in the 2nd Congressional District. Mm-hmm. The endorsed candidate barely broke 10% of the vote. Okay? It wasn't even close. He finished a distant third to Shamari Figures and Anthony Daniels. Mm-hmm. So that endorsement means less and less every year because, there are other organizations, there's other groups, there's other voices out there, and people don't trust the ADC as much as they used to. At one point, David, I would agree with you. It was a strong organization that could help get Democratic votes out. Today, they are a shell of their self.
Yeah, I think they really, really hurt themselves with some of the things they pulled on the caucuses, because a lot of those caucuses that they did away with had a lot of black members in there, especially the young people. And it really turned some of those folks off, I think. And I think that really hurts them in the long run.
Well, and that I don't disagree with that either. I think you both just made, solid points, but it's the point I'm trying to get to. And really, I think the larger point here is that as I have watched this drama in the state party play out over the past few years, it appears to me as though there is, correctly or incorrectly, right or wrong, there is the perception among a core group of people that this is something that is largely defined by race. And this was even before Randy Kelly was elected as chair.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you is, if you were to even somehow manage to succeed to having a new election of party leadership, and new people placed in, black or white or whatever color, whatever disposition they might be or might have, how do you avoid the inevitable? And I think the inevitable is that this is still going to be seen in key sectors of the black community and perhaps some sections of the white community as something that ultimately came down to race.
David, I just disagree with the premise. And the way you fight that is with information, and we don't get information. It is perceived as a race issue because that's all that Randy Kelly talks about. He has done it on your show. Okay. He has done it on this podcast. He's done it with every interview. He and to a lesser extent, Joe Reed, have made it a racial issue when in fact it is purely an ADC issue. There is a difference. Okay. And right now there is a faction within the SDC that is still loyal to ADC. Okay. That's the strongest faction. You get outside the SDC and that power is diminished greatly. And so, yes, you're right. It is inevitable because people that get affected, people that get challenged are going to raise that. When in fact, and the goodest example, and we've talked about this, was when the bylaws got changed in 2018. I got accused, others got accused of taking away black votes of the SDC, when in fact, we expanded the SDC and it was the exact same percentage of black voters on that SDC as it was before we changed it. The difference, though, David, is that there were a lot of folks in the black community that got on the SDC that are on there now that weren't loyal to ADC. This wasn't an issue of taking away black votes, but it was a little bit of an issue of taking away ADC power. And there are distinct differences. And I can tell you, having talked to so many, and Josh kind of hit on this a little bit, a lot of these younger folks that are getting engaged now, they don't have that same loyalty. They're looking at a bigger picture. They're looking at the state as a whole and not just the black community or ADC and say they don't have that same thing. And until we get away from that, because you haven't seen anybody except Kelly and Reed and a few of their acolytes that have claimed race. This has been something that people are trying to do. We changed the state party rules and got more people included. And guess what? We elected the first black chair of the state party, but he was not an ADC guy. Okay. And that was Chris England. And so, let's just talk about that a little bit in the sense that whenever you hear the state party leadership claiming about race, what they're really saying is that we're taking away the influence of the ADC within the state party, because the black vote has never been diluted.
Let me just give one last pushback, Doug. I recall this was, I can't remember the exact year. I can't remember if it was 2016, 2018. But there was a New York Times article in which there was focus given to the state of Democratic politics in Alabama. And in that article, more than one candidate was quoted. And I want to say you were quoted. I want to say Bob Vance was quoted. I'm not going to try to, because I don't have the article in front of me, I'm not going to try to make any attributions here, but I do recall that in the article, the sentiment that was being expressed by some of you or all of you was that the only way the Democrats were going to win statewide is if there was a white candidate. I remember that article very clearly, and I've referenced it through the years. Do you not recall this article or that sentiment being expressed?
I don't recall that article at all. I don't think I would have ever said that, although, as a matter of votes, if you look historically at the voting in Alabama, in Alabama, I can't remember what the population vote is now, 26% is black. It's hard to break through on a statewide basis. It just is, as a practical matter. We have too much of a racial history to completely break through with that. I don't remember that particular article. I know that I don't believe I was ever quoted as saying anything along those lines, because I have encouraged some black officials to run for office, statewide office, including Supreme Court justices, campaign for them. Mm-hmm. But we got a long way to go, because you've still got to get a certain percentage of white votes. And when you have the state party chairman and vice chairman talking about nothing but race, it's kind of hard to overcome some of that. They're the ones talking about this, not anybody else. The caucuses that came through and everybody else talks about unity and trying to represent everybody.
Yeah, those guys don't. If I'm not mistaken, I think that story was specific to the Roy Moore race and the abilities of a candidate at that point to be able to lure in enough Republican voters to win that Senate race at that time, and whether or not a black, and I think it was kind of bemoaning the fact that this is where the party is at this point in Alabama. And we have these issues, that where it would be tough for a black candidate to have won that race and broken through with some of these people, but and it was being critical of the voters and the reality of things. But I may be remembering it wrong as well. But I'll say, David, do you have anything else? Because I know we've kept Doug for a long time.
Let me say one quick thing,
sure.
Guys. It's been white public officials that have tried to bring folks together. We don't have a George Wallace out there anymore that's a Democrat in Alabama that is dividing people along racial lines. But we do have people that are professed Democrats and leaders in the Democratic Party that do that. And that makes it a lot tougher. And we've got to make sure that Democrats as a whole try to be equal for everybody. It doesn't matter. And when the chairman of the party continues to talk about and divide people along racial lines, we're going to struggle. We're going to struggle getting to first base.
Yeah. Right. Well, the struggle is certainly real. We know that. So, hey, man, listen, we got to get you on more often so we don't have to keep you so long. Because we got a lot of questions, and and it's always a great conversation, and we really do appreciate you spending the time with us and hanging around and answering everything and being so candid about it all. Really, really do appreciate it.
Always
thanks,
good.
Doug.
Always good to be on with you guys. Okay.
Yeah, we appreciate
Anytime.
you, Doug. Thanks.
Yes, sir. That is Doug Jones, the forever senator of Alabama. We always appreciate him and appreciate what he does out there. All right, we're going to slide out. We're going to come back in just a minute and try to wrap this thing up. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a minute. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. Really appreciate Doug Jones coming on, spending some time with us. Appreciate the folks at Wind Creek sponsoring this bad boy. Also SPLC should have a couple of new sponsors coming on board here in the very near future.
All right.
Yeah, you like that? A Merry Christmas to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll see. Got one working up now and one working up for later. And so we're moving right along with this thing. Hopefully the new attitude of the Democratic Party, where they start to recognize the value of of podcasts and things of that nature, we'll have David and I having good Christmases for long times. I would love for this podcast to be the primary driver of one small child's college education.
I hear you, brother.
Yeah, listen, we are. We're gonna try to go faster than we had planned, because we didn't really plan on keeping Doug for 50 minutes. Okay,
yeah, good though, good content.
Yeah, it was a great
good
conversation, and it was longer. And listen, as I've told you before, if it's too long for you, cut it off. Cut it off. So David, they can get out of it the same way they got in it. It's not like a damn gym contract. You can leave when you want to. Okay, we don't charge you for this. But we do want to cover a couple of things before we get in. I wrote a column for today, which is Wednesday, about the rollbacks of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and other programs within corporations in America. And which I focused on Walmart, and the reason I focused on Walmart is because it was Walmart's statement was more open and brazenly stupid, and in which they essentially apologized, for these programs after a lot of right wingers got on and started pushing back against DEI programs because they're racist against white people. And because equality is racist against white people. And it's just, it's the most ludicrous thing you've ever heard in your life. And they basically issued an apology saying that, they strive to do better, and everything that they do comes from a place of wanting, inclusion, in the workplace. And, the absurdity of it can only, to me, when I was reading this thing last week, when they issued this statement, I was like, wasn't it a very short time ago? Am I misremembering that there was a very short time ago that we had these same companies, these same corporations issuing statements talking about how horrified they were at the long and ugly history of hiring discrimination within their companies, and how they were going to right that historic wrong, and that they were going to come out and put in place these programs that uplifted blacks and Hispanics and all of these different groups of people that have been marginalized and mistreated and paid unfairly and not promoted properly and not given the opportunity to be hired. And so I thought, well, Google's got this search function where you can go in and search for certain topics. Right. And then you can put it into a cutoff date. And so it'll only supply you with results up to that cutoff date. And so I just put in the first of 2022 and said, let me see what was happening back in, say, 21 and below. I know that's a long time for y'all, back in the early 20s. But as it turns out, I was not misremembering this. We went through the companies putting the blackout symbols on their social media posts on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. We had we're going to create a whole programs. We're going to have a whole academy for how we better address these workplace injustices that have happened over the course of the years. There was study after study after study done from universities, all of them finding essentially the same thing. One done by Harvard, Northwestern, and a group of researchers from Norway that looked at more than 50,000 applications for jobs, in which they found that white people were 36% more likely to get callbacks on job applications over equally qualified black applicants. It was it was unending. I could have gone on for page after page after page of these companies citing the injustices that they had participated in and talking about how horrified they were in the wake of the George Floyd protests to know that they had contributed to this blight upon society. And now, 3 years later, and the re-election of Donald Trump, and they are apologizing to the fucking white people.
Mm-hmm.
For daring to subject them to equality in hiring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
so let me give you the nugget that for me encapsulates everything you're saying. When a group of people, in this case white people, primarily white men, but white women too, have been accustomed to privilege, equity feels like oppression. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we, historically, those of us who are in historically disenfranchised groups, have been seeing with white people, generally speaking. Obviously not all white people, yourself excluded, obviously, from this, and our producer and others. But people are complaining about the fact that there's a right sizing going on, and they feel like it's encroaching on their privilege. And because it has been encroaching on their privilege, they have assumed that their privilege was supposed to be the norm and the standard, and that anything less than that then is oppression.
Yes.
When in reality, what they're not seeing is that the historical advantages that they have been privileged to receive have been achieved or enjoyed at the expense of other people. Mm-hmm. And they've been okay with that, or they've been in denial about it, or they haven't recognized it.
Yeah.
And so that's where the problem is.
Oh, I mean, there's no doubt, man. I mean, we talked about this a little bit with the Caroline Dobson deal, with the history of the slaves and all that. And again, it's not, nobody is saying to Caroline Dobson that she's responsible for what took place with her ancestors. Okay. Nobody is holding her and thinking less of her because of that. I certainly don't. I think she's a very accomplished lady, and I'm happy that she's gotten to the station in life that she possesses. Okay. I don't begrudge her any of that. But what I do begrudge are these people that then, like her, who then say, this CRT is a real problem. This teaching of this history that's tearing down America by bringing up these past things that are going on. You don't want people to know how you got there? You know, you don't want people to
Right.
know what led to the successes and the opportunities that you have while others don't enjoy those, and why it might be that we have, remarkably high poverty within black communities, especially in certain segments of the country. You don't understand why that might be. Don't you think there's a history? Because let me tell you, simply having black skin doesn't make you poor.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, so maybe there's something else underlying this, and it's always been the most idiotic thing in the world to me. These people who roam around and think that the color of your skin or your background, your ethnic background, somehow makes you more susceptible to going to jail. No,
Well, it's
morons.
the propaganda that they've been fed.
Yes.
Not just in their lifetime, but that's been baked into the culture for several centuries now. I mean, the first slave came to these shores in 1619. So for over 400 years, there's been this accumulation of stereotyping and systematic kind of encoded discrimination, culturally, legally. And so many people, I think, have just come to accept by default, these stereotypes, Josh. And some have just been, it's all they've known since they were children.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's passed on from generation to generation. Yeah. I remember when my son, and I think I've told this story before, when my son was, I think, in third grade, and one of his little white buddies said that his grandfather said that my son was nothing but a little nigger. And my son didn't even know what the word was. Because we didn't use the word in our house.
Right.
So we had to sit my son down and explain to him at 8 or 9 years old, whatever it was, what a nigger was and what that meant. And how, and the evil that it represented. And then it turned out that the kid who used the word didn't even know what it meant. And I'll never forget, as a part of the accountability process, and I was really glad that we had a white female principal. My son's teacher was white, and they were all very accountable for this situation. Not that it was their fault, but they were accountable in trying to resolve it. And I'll never forget that this child and my son and myself and my ex-wife and the teacher were huddled in the hallway one day after this all had happened. And the teacher was explaining to this child, what the word was and why it was a problem. Kid breaks down and starts crying and apologizing to my son. This child didn't know any better.
Yeah.
But his parents, we came to understand, were mortified.
Yeah.
It was the grandfather. It was the grandfather who, was trying to implant this evil stuff in this child's mind.
Yeah, there are, what they fear is the knowledge by the young people that they're going to come to understand what actually has taken place, and this easy pandering on race, it is going to be something that's of the past, and man, I did a story a while back about talking to the daughter. It was I'm pretty sure it was the daughter of a man who was thrown off a bridge. Black man was thrown off a bridge in Alabama back in the 50s or 60s, and she had agreed to talk to a podcasting class at the University of Alabama, and they were going to make a podcast out of this. And she had gone in and they had talked to her about this story. And, of course, this was in the height of the, hey, everybody's going to start treating black people better movement, three whole years ago, before we had to apologize to white people for treating black people better. And and the kids in that class at the University of Alabama heard this story, and they were able to put a real live person as a face on these horrific things that they had heard about or that they had seen in movies at some point, but were essentially far off, almost fairy tales to them. And they learned about how that affected her and her family, and how it led them to move from the state to somewhere else, and how it pushed her to do certain things in life, and how it haunted her nightmares even to this day. And it affected those kids in such a way that they didn't feel guilty, personally, for being white. Because that's the big thing. Well, you're making my child feel guilty for something that's white and making them think that they're inherently evil humans. No, that's not what they felt. They didn't feel that they were bad people because they learned that other bad people did something horrible to another human being. But what it did was it allowed them a firsthand look at the effect of that racism and that those horrible acts on the lives of real people who shared many of the same dreams and aspirations that they did. But because of these actions and because of the way that they were treated, they were stunted and they were changed forever. And it gave them an opportunity to look at that and to understand how that then applies today to people, and how you shouldn't do those things, and why those things matter, and why it matters to fight against those things and to learn about this stuff. And that's what they fear more than anything else, is that knowledge being passed along to those kids, and this easy out of things just not being, and not being there anymore, that you can't just rely on the fact that, oh, well, that guy's black, so and it's just, all of a sudden, those people became human beings to them, and we can't have that. So, right. I mean, and that's these DEI programs and things, and they were righting a wrong for so long, and for 3 years, and it wasn't. It didn't. I'll say this: I never feared for my job security, or my daughter being able to be employed because the playing field was a little more level, or because somebody was getting an opportunity that they should have had long ago. It's so short-sighted and so mean-spirited and so ugly, and I wish that people were better. And speaking of that, it gets us to our right-wing nut, which is the folks that clean up Alabama. I believe it started as Clean Up Prattville, but now it's Clean Up Alabama. These are your library nuts that are running around trying to move books all over the place, and they've now essentially made it impossible for a 15-year-old to watch Moana at the Huntsville Library. And the lunacy of us skipping over all of the problems that we have in this state, especially in the education realm, and arriving at, we've got kids wanting to go to the library and they may see a cartoon penis. It's just yeah.
So you got that, and then you've also got, Josh, what's going on in Prattville, where they are opposing sight unseen a float in a Christmas parade with from a group that's I think it's called Prattville Pride, if I'm not mistaken. Sight unseen, they're assuming the worst, and there seems to be this automatic assumption that any group that is promoting the humanity of a group of people that happens to represent from their standpoint things that they don't agree with for religious reasons or moral reasons or whatever it is, that they're automatically assuming, well, this is going to be bad, this is going to be horrible, this is going to be something we don't want our children to see, and they're going to be doing this and they're going to be doing that. And you know, the truth of the matter is that it's a parade that the public has a right to participate in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as long as they're not violating any laws, then the public has a right to express themselves, not just one segment of the public, but any segment of the public. It's a free society.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I got to tell you, man, it's endlessly depressing that my 6-year-old can handle these situations better than some of the adults. It really is. And I don't just think it's my 6-year-old. I think it's most 6-year-olds. Because, you know, we've had this discussion about, you know, a kid having 2 moms or 2 dads, and, you know, 2 women getting married, 2 men getting married. And, you know, and we explain, you know, sometimes people just love each other and that's what they want to do. And, you know, the only follow-up was, is that okay? I'm like, yeah, I mean, whatever people want to do, whatever makes them happy, as long as they're not hurting anybody or breaking any laws, then, you know, I think that's absolutely great. You know, you find somebody that loves you as much as you love them, and y'all are happy, then who is anybody else to stand in your way, right?
Right.
And, you know, I was like, yeah. Can we have pizza? You know, that was her.
All right.
I mean, it's just, you know what? They don't care, man. And why do y'all care so much? Why do you care so much about other consenting adults? And you know, the parade, the float and stuff is not to throw it in your face. Okay.
Right.
That's not what it is. All they are asking for is some recognition and acceptance. And, you know, if y'all weren't still so freaked out and still doing some of this dumb shit, then they wouldn't feel the need to have a float to let people know that they exist and that it's okay. All right, because they would exist and it would be okay, and everybody would get along and would be happy. All right, but you can't do it, you know, and so here we are, and it's just, you know, it's just endless. It's endless with this stupidity. It really is. Now, you know, all right, we'll give you a little bit of us, an hour of Doug Jones. You know, what more could you ask for free?
Yeah.
We're going to slide out of here. Till next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.